This happened about 2 years ago. I had just moved about an hour and a half away from home, the first time I had lived away from home, but was working at a kids' activity camp. All the staff lived in two massive cabins in the woods. There were about 40 people in each, 2 to 3 to a room, so you can imagine how big this cabin was. Everybody became really close. Some people knew each other from previous years working at this particular camp. None of us really locked our doors because we all knew each other, and everybody hung out in different friends' rooms all the time. At this camp, my job was working with the kids during the day and doing evening shifts at the bar, which was there for the staff and teachers, as well as the parents that had come with the children. One night my roommate and I were both working an evening shift at the bar. She was finishing a couple of hours earlier as she was on a different shift. My roommate, Debs, decided that she was just going back to the room to read and wait for me to finish so we could watch a movie. She had been gone about 5 minutes, which is how long it takes to get from the bar to the cabin, when my phone started ringing with her caller ID. I picked up the call as the bar was pretty dead that night, and the only people in there were staff. When I picked up, nobody was saying anything on the other end. I figured she just butt dialed me by accident and hung up. About a minute later, I got another phone call from a friend that lived across the hallway from us. She told me that I needed to come back to the room now, so I asked the guy I was working with to cover while I popped back to the room quickly. I walked down the hallway, and there were about 5 people just standing outside of my room. I walked inside, and Debs was just standing there crying, which isn't like her at all. Our stuff was all over our room. Please note, this is very weird because I'm pretty sure I have OCD, and often tidied my side and her side of the room, even if she didn't want me to. She went on to tell me that her phone had gone missing. I then asked her about calling me before I came back to the room, and she had no idea what I was talking about. It was clear that someone had taken her phone and knew who to call straight away. There should have been no point in stealing her phone, as it was literally worthless, maybe 10 pounds at the most. A few days later, we started noticing that things had gone missing. But not normal things people would steal. They could have taken laptops, Kindles, a PlayStation, and games. Instead, all they took was my bra and knickers. Some clean, and some from the dirty washing. This made me feel sick, especially because we knew everyone that we lived/worked with. For a few days, I kept getting these phone calls from Deb's phone, with just silence on the other end. We obviously went and reported it, and our bosses said they would look into it. We kind of got blamed for leaving our door unlocked, which I understand as being really stupid now. The creepy thing was, a few days later, I walked into the staff lounge, and Deb's phone was just placed on the windowsill. Nobody was in there, and nobody seemed to be around. After that point, I noped out of there as fast as I could, and locked myself in my room until Debs came back. Nothing ever came out of it, and we never found out who it was. But I definitely have a feeling it was someone that knew us quite well, and who knew when we would be both out of our room. For the life of me, I still don't know who stole my underwear, my roommate's phone, and who trashed our room. But I have definitely learned a lesson, and that's not to leave my door unlocked, because there are gross creepers out there. This story happened when I was 16 years old, and lived in an old 2-story house in the Netherlands, located near the forest in a farmer's village. I have always been sensitive to things that happen around me. I never felt safe in my own house, and as a kid I would never play in my own room because I was too scared to be alone upstairs. If I was ever sleepy, I would sneak downstairs until my parents would go to sleep, so I wouldn't have to be alone. Throughout the years, I think I've gotten used to the feeling that somebody is watching me in my own room, seeing shadows, hearing voices, or even feeling someone hitting my head. Sometimes I would confront my parents about this, and they would tell me that the house is old, and that people have died in it, and it's possible their spirits still linger. Fast forward to that night. It was a normal night for me. I went to bed and thought nothing of it. Until I woke up in a pure panic in the middle of the night. I remember getting up out of my bed, but I wasn't in control of my own body. The closest thing I can describe it to is if you're half awake, but still in that sleepy state. There was a voice in my dream that told me I have to leave. Get out. Get out. You need to get out, was the only thing I heard. Even after all these years, I still know exactly what that voice sounds like. It wasn't like my own voice, but lower and demanding. To give you a view of my room at that time, my door was wide open, and is always wide open because it makes me more comfortable to sleep. But in my dream, there was no door, so if I wanted to escape, I could have gone through the door, but I couldn't see it, as if it wasn't there. On the opposite side of the door is a window that I barely open. Getting back to the story, I stood up in a panic, knowing that I had to leave the room no matter what. You need to leave. Hurry. You need to get out, were the only thoughts that rushed through my head as I was frantically touching the walls for an exit. I remember the feeling of the cold walls in search of a door, but it wasn't me who was doing this. Again, if I wanted to leave, I could have gone through the door, but it wasn't there. My body turned around to the opposite side of the room, and I found myself touching the mirror. The weird thing is that I couldn't see my own reflection, but I remember I was clearly touching the cold mirror. My panic was getting worse, as if someone was coming for me. Then all of a sudden, I turned to the window. My thoughts changed from get out to you need to jump. I ran to the window and placed my hand on the handle. You need to jump, get out, and jump. Those were the only thoughts that went through my head. Since I never really opened my window, it is very hard to open, and it makes a loud squeaking noise when it opens. The noise is so loud that when I actually did open the window, it woke me up. And there I was, standing there with my hand on the window, ready to jump 2 stories down. I took a step back and tried to process what just happened, but since it was the middle of the night, I just went back to bed, thinking it was just a weird dream. I woke up the next morning, completely shocked. The window was wide open, and everything that was on the table by my window was scattered around the room. My mirror and wall were smudged with my handprints. The handprints were all over, and I began to remember the panic I felt during the dream. I ran downstairs to tell my parents what happened. They looked at each other in shock and asked me more about the event. They went upstairs and saw what happened to my room. Later that day, my dad zip-tied my window shut in case something like that happened again. Weird things still happen around that house. I currently live in the US, so I don't have to deal with it, but when I go back for the holidays, I always have a weird feeling being in my old room. I'm glad and lucky I woke up from the squeaking noise of the window and that I didn't jump. I think if I didn't wake up, I would have jumped for sure. The voice in my head was so strong and I had no control over my body until I woke up. To this day, my parents and I sometimes bring it up. They try to figure out why it happened or what it was. I personally have no idea what it could have been. The only thing I could think of is that it could have been an angry spirit. But I truly have no idea. When I was about 13, my aunt and uncle used to have a seasonal campsite at a smallish lake about 3 hours away from our town. It was nothing fancy, but it was a cheap summer vacation spot, and my whole family used to go up there a lot. I often brought my friend, let's call her Kay, to stay with us, as I am a lonely-ass only child and valued the company. Since the campground was so small, especially the seasonal sites, it really felt like home. We knew many people at the lake by name, and they knew us too. Most of the campground staff had grown accustomed to Kay and I riding our bikes around, eating ice cream, and terrorizing the frogs down by the water, and they were all very friendly to us. Like I said, it felt like home. It's also probably worth mentioning that both Kay and I grew up in a very small Canadian town, one where everyone waves when you drive by on the street, no one locks their doors, and everyone is your friend. But let's move on. One day we were down by the water at around sunset. We were sitting on the dock, dipping our toes in the water and just about to head back to our campsite for supper. We were spent from a day of roasting in the sun, biking, and catching frogs. A disheveled man, maybe 40 or 50 years old, approached the dock behind us, and being the friendly young rural girls we were, we both waved hello and exchanged some pleasantries with him. He continued to approach us, chatting politely about the weather and other small talk. He was wearing a stained beer t-shirt, one of the ones that you used to get for free in a box of beer in the early 2000s, and dirty jeans. He had straggly, greasy hair and was missing a tooth. This might immediately set off red flags for you, but again, we were from a small town, and this dude looked like half of my dad's side of the family, so neither of us were fazed. During the course of our conversation, he sat down beside me on the dock, dipping his feet in the water alongside ours. He continued to chat with us, asking about what we had been doing that day, where our campsite was, who our parents were, that kind of stuff. He said he knew my parents, that they were friends. We probably should have been smarter than to continue to talk to him, but being the only child that I was, I had always felt comfortable chatting with adults, and didn't bat an eye at the conversation. Plus, he said he knew my parents. What could go wrong? Eventually, he started asking us about boating. He pointed to a boat off the dock, a fancy one with a gold glittery finish, and asked if we liked it. We did. He told us that it was his boat, and that it was the fastest and coolest boat on the lake. He asked us if we had ever been to any of the secret islands on the lake. We said we haven't. I remember thinking how odd this was, as the lake was truly not that large or impressive, so a secret island seemed strange, and very enticing. He told us he owned one of the islands, and its name was Zeke. He asked us if we wanted to go to Zeke with him. We hesitated slightly, but ultimately wanted to go for a boat ride. By then, the sun was nothing but an orange glow slipping into the horizon. We were just standing up to go towards the boat when my uncle came down the hill to the lake in his truck. He honked the horn and yelled at us to get our asses in the truck. We were supposed to be home by dark, and we were in shit. He threw our bikes in the box, and we got in the truck. My uncle quizzically asked us who the man we were talking to was, and we told him he was some guy that knew my parents. We also told him he was going to take us to his secret island in his cool boat. When Kay pointed out the boat to my uncle, he told us that boat belonged to Phil, the owner of the convenience store at the lake. He then began to lecture us about why agreeing to go on a boat ride with a perfect stranger was not a good idea. He confirmed my suspicion that there were no islands on the small lake. We both began to feel kind of freaked out, which only continued when we told my parents about the man, and they were sure they didn't know him. My mom lectured the shit out of us and told us he probably wanted to wear our skin like a mask. Creepy man at the lake? Let's not meet.